On a single, blood-soaked field in the west of England, a 29-year-old king does not just win a battle, he executes a dynasty. It is the 4th of May, 1471. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth and impending violence. For 3 generations, the House of Lancaster and the House of York have torn England apart, drenching the soil in a civil war that seems to have no end. But today, the chaos stops. Today, the wars cease to be a struggle for territory and become a fight for survival. The entire future of the Lancastrian line rests on the shoulders of one 17-year-old boy, Prince Edward of Westminster. He is the last hope of a fallen king, the final piece on the board. By sunset, that hope will be extinguished, his body lying in the mud of a place history will forever call the Bloody Meadow. This is not just a defeat, it is a political annihilation. This is the story of how Edward IV shattered the Lancastrian succession and locked in his regime with cold, brutal finality. The wind whipping off the English Channel carries the taste of salt and disaster. It is Easter Sunday, April 14th, 1471, and Queen Margaret of Anjou stands on the docks of Weymouth, her heart turning to ice. She has just returned from exile to reclaim the throne for her husband Henry VI, only to be greeted by a catastrophe. On the very day of her arrival, her greatest ally, the Earl of Warwick, has been crushed and killed by Edward IV at the Battle of Barnet. The grand strategy is in tatters before it has even begun. But Margaret is the she-wolf of France, a woman of iron will who has fought for her son's birthright since he was in the cradle. She looks at the 17-year-old Prince Edward, clad in polished armor, the symbol of the Lancastrian future. She cannot turn back now. The decision is made instantly. They will not fight Edward IV here in the open south. They will march north, hugging the Welsh border, to link up with Jasper Tudor's fresh levies. If they can cross the River Severn, they can disappear into the Welsh mountains and prolong the war for a decade. But Edward IV, the giant Yorkist warrior king, is already moving. He is operating from Windsor, and his scouts, his forerunners, are painting him a picture of the enemy's movements. He understands the geometry of this campaign with terrifying clarity. He does not need to destroy Margaret's army immediately. He simply needs to pin them against the river. He realizes this is no longer a war of positions, but a foot race, a race to the Severn. If Margaret crosses, the war continues. If he catches her on the wrong side of the water, it ends. He pushes his army to a marching pace that defies belief, ignoring the protests of his captains and the exhaustion of his men. The Yorkist war machine begins to grind westward, a steel predator hunting its prey across the Cotswold Hills. The campaign transforms into a grueling trial of endurance. It is early May, but the English weather has turned freakishly hot. The sun beats down on men encased in heavy plate armor, turning their suits into ovens. The Lancastrian army, desperate and terrified, pushes through the wooded marshy lowlands of the Severn Vale. They are marching through what the chronicles call foul country, dragging their heavy artillery and baggage trains through deep clay and narrow lanes. Water is scarce. Men drop from heatstroke where they stand, left behind to die in the ditches. But the Duke of Somerset, commanding the Lancastrian vanguard, drives them on with the whip of necessity. They must reach the bridge at Gloucester. On the morning of Friday, May 3rd, the exhausted Lancastrian host arrives at the gates of Gloucester. This is their salvation. The bridge here is their gateway to Wales and safety. But as they approach the city walls, they see the banners of York flying from the ramparts. The governor has received Edward's orders: hold the city at all costs. The gates remain shut. Somerset threatens to storm the walls, but he looks over his shoulder. The dust clouds of Edward's pursuing army are already visible on the horizon. With a collective groan of despair, the Lancastrian army turns north again. They must march another 10 miles to the next crossing at Tewkesbury. It is a death march. The soldiers have been moving for days with little food and almost no water, drinking from muddy ruts in the road. By the time they stumble into the town of Tewkesbury late that afternoon, they have covered 24 miles in a single day, a superhuman feat for medieval infantry. They reach the river crossing at lower load, but the ford is deep and the current is strong. To attempt a crossing now, with Edward's vanguard breathing down their necks, would be suicide. They would be cut to pieces in the water. Somerset looks at his shattered men and makes the only choice left to him. They will not cross. They will turn and fight. They deploy in a field south of the abbey known as the Gastons, a nightmare landscape of hedges and drainage ditches. Edward IV arrives as the sun begins to set. He camps just 3 miles away. In the Yorkist camp, Edward issues a curious order. He has spotted a thickly wooded park to the left of his position. He suspects a trap, or perhaps he senses an opportunity. He detaches 200 mounted spearmen, his elite household troops, and orders them to hide in the woods. Their orders are simple: attack whenever they see an opening. These 200 men, invisible in the trees, will decide the fate of England. The sun rises on Saturday, May 4th, 1471. The heat returns with a vengeance. The Lancastrian army is deployed in 3 divisions, with the 17-year-old Prince Edward in the center. The battle opens not with a charge, but with a deafening roar. Edward has brought a superior train of artillery. The Yorkist gunners begin to pound the Lancastrian lines. Cannonballs smash through the hedges, ploughing bloody furrows through the tightly packed ranks. Arrows fill the sky like angry insects. The Lancastrians are taking casualties without striking a blow. They are pinned in their defensive enclosures, forced to stand and bleed under the summer sun. The Duke of Somerset, a man of violent temper, snaps. He sees a series of lanes, evil lanes, running through the hedges that might allow him to flank the Yorkist line. He orders his division to advance. It is a bold, desperate gamble. Somerset leads his men out of their defensive positions and crashes into the flank of the Yorkist vanguard. The impact is ferocious. The 2 lines collide in a grinding melee of poleaxes, bills, and swords. For a moment, the Yorkist line buckles. Gloucester's men are fighting for their lives. If Somerset can roll up the Yorkist flank, the day is won. He looks to the center, expecting to see Lord Wenlock and Prince Edward advancing to support him, to pin the Yorkist center so they cannot reinforce Gloucester. But the Lancastrian center does not move. Lord Wenlock stands frozen. His banners hang limp in the heat. Whether it is treachery, cowardice, or the simple confusion of the enclosed terrain, Wenlock fails to advance. Somerset is left fighting alone, his division extended and exposed, grinding against the combined weight of the Yorkist army. And then, the trap springs. The 200 spearmen hiding in the woods of Tewkesbury Park see the exposed rear of Somerset's struggling division. They do not wait for a signal. They spur their horses and burst from the tree line with a roar that freezes the blood. They crash into the backs of the Lancastrian soldiers. Panic spreads like a contagion. Somerset's men, believing they are surrounded by a fresh army, disintegrate. They break formation and run, stumbling through the hedges they had just cleared. The retreat becomes a massacre. The Yorkist line surges forward. The field leading down to the River Swillgate becomes a bottleneck of screaming men. This is the Bloody Meadow. In the midst of the rout, a scene of Shakespearean tragedy plays out. The Duke of Somerset, having escaped the ruin of his own division, rides back to the center where Lord Wenlock still sits on his horse. Somerset screams, "Traitor!" and swinging his battle-axe, smashes Wenlock's skull in before the terrified troops. The Lancastrian command structure implodes. The focus of the battle shifts to a desperate hunt. The Yorkist soldiers are not looking for ransom, they are looking for the prince. Prince Edward turns his horse to flee towards the town, but there is no escape. Whether he is cut down in the chaos of the rout or captured and butchered in cold blood, the result is the same. The Prince of Wales dies in the mud of Tewkesbury. With his last breath, the House of Lancaster dies too. The fighting spills into the streets and up to the heavy oak doors of the Abbey. Edward grants a pardon that is nothing more than a lie. 2 days later, the Duke of Somerset and the surviving leaders are dragged from the Abbey and beheaded in the town's center. The message is brutal. The war is over because there is no one left to fight it. Weeks later, the Shadow King, Henry VI, is murdered in the Tower of London. The victory is absolute. Edward IV has secured his dynasty with a ruthlessness that shocks Christendom. The peace of violence settles over England. Today, in the Abbey choir, a simple brass plaque marks where the young Prince Edward lies. It reads, "Alas, the savagery of men." It is a quiet epitaph for the day the medieval world tore itself apart and a new England was forged in the fire of dynastic extinction. If you enjoyed this journey into the brutal reality of the Wars of the Roses, please like this video and subscribe for more cinematic history.